Hello. I really enjoyed telling the story about Elias and the mirror in his mind. So this time we will continue with a new story called Inkbound and see where the story will take us. So, have something nice to drink, lean back or lay down, relax and enjoy the story. So, it is time for Inkbound, Chapter 1, the first sentence. Nathan Carter wanted to be a writer. He didn't just want to write stories, he wanted to create worlds, to breathe life into words the way his favorite authors had done for him. Every book he had loved felt like a portal, a doorway into something real. But nothing he wrote ever felt real enough, until now. It started with a challenge. Nathan had just turned 19, living in a cramped apartment over a laundromat, scraping by on a barista's salary. He had set himself a goal, 1 chapter a day, no matter what. Tonight was the first. The story was simple. A lonely drifter named Felix arrives in a town where no one remembers their past. The people there are hollow, shadows of themselves, and Felix, for some reason, is the only one who can help them remember. Nathan wrote feverishly, fingers hammering at the keyboard, the words pouring out as if had been waiting to be told. The chapter ended with Felix stepping into the town square, staring at the statue that bore his own face. Nathan exhaled. His hands ached. His coffee had gone cold. He saved the file, pushed back his chair, and stretched. Chapter 1 done. Outside, the city hummed. Car horns, distant voices, the occasional bark of a stray dog, normal sounds. But something in the air felt different. Nathan shook it off, shut his laptop, and went to bed. He didn't see the word shifting on the screen, didn't see the cursor blinking on its own, didn't see the chapter rewriting itself. Interlude when the author is away. The town square was silent. Felix stood before the statue, staring at his own stone-carved eyes. His mind buzzed with questions. Why was his face here? Why did this town feel like a place he had been before? He turned. The street seems empty. Lanterns flickered in the windows, but no shadows moved inside. Hello? 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 His voice echoed. The air tightened, and then, as if the town had been waiting, they came. Figures emerging from doorways, stepping into the light. People he had not yet met, names he had not yet learned, all of them staring. You shouldn't be here, a woman whispered. Felix's heart pounded. What do you mean? I just got here. The people exchanged glances, some with fear, others with awareness. He hasn't written it yet, a man muttered. He doesn't know. Felix's stomach turned. Who? They all looked up, beyond the sky, beyond the stars, to something unseen. The author, someone said. And for the first time, Felix felt something he had never felt before, like a story coming undone, like a dream waking up. And then Nathan's alarm blared. The words froze. The figures stopped moving. The town held its breath because the author had returned. Chapter 2: The Space Between Stories. Nathan woke up with an idea burning in his mind. The chapter had come to him in a dream. Felix talking to the townspeople, learning their secrets, discovering why no one remembered their past. It felt real, more vivid than anything he had written before. He grabbed his laptop, opened the document, and he froze. The chapter wasn't how he left it. The last sentence, where Felix had simply stared at the statue, was gone. Instead, new words filled the screen. "You shouldn't be here," a woman whispered. Nathan's pulse quickened. He hadn't written that, had he? Maybe he had dozed off at the keyboard, typing in some half-dream state. He scrolled back, scanning the paragraph. It was good, better than what he usually wrote. But the weird part? The phrasing, the rhythm, it didn't feel like his writing. Still, it fit the story. Shrugging off the unease, he started typing. Felix took a step toward the townspeople. "What do you mean I shouldn't be here?" The woman, thin, with sharp cheekbones and wary eyes, hesitated. "This place, it isn't meant to be seen yet." Seen by who? The people shifted uncomfortably. One of them, an older man with grizzled beard, looked up at the sky. "The author," he murmured. Felix frowned. What does he mean? What does that mean? Silence. Then the woman sighed. "It means we are not meant to exist, not yet." Felix's heart pounded. "But I do exist." "Only because he wrote you." Felix shook his head. None of this made sense. He had a life. He had memories. Growing up in the city, traveling alone, arriving here. Unless something cold slithered down his spine. What if those memories weren't his? What if they were written? Nathan sat back, crackling his knuckles. This was going really well. He had never written this fast before. The dialogue felt alive, as if the characters were speaking for themselves. He kept going, adding a new character, a young girl named Elara, someone who might help Felix uncover the town's mysteries. Hours passed. By the time he hit save, it was nearly 2 a.m. He shut the laptop, exhaustion pressing him down. Outside, the city was quiet. Nathan went to bed, dreaming of Felix, of Elara, of a town that seemed to breathe. He didn't notice the screen flicker, didn't see the cursor move on its own, didn't hear the soft whisper from the laptop speaker. "He's still writing us." Interlude: when the author is away. Elara sat on the town's crumbling fountain, watching Felix pace. "You feel it, don't you?" she asked. Felix rubbed his temples. "I do not know what I feel." "You do," she said. "You're waking up." He stopped, looked at her. The town had changed overnight. The air felt denser, the streets more solid, as if something unseen had stitched them together. Something had expanded. More buildings, more roads, like a world growing, piece by piece. Felix turned back to Elara. What happens when he stops writing? Elara glanced up at the sky, her expression unreadable. Then we wait, she said. Felix swallowed. And what happens if he never writes again? Elara hesitated. Then, in the quiet of the unwritten space, she whispered, "Then we fade." Chapter 3, The Forgotten Spaces. Nathan woke with a strange heaviness in his chest. It wasn't exhaustion. Though he had stayed up far too late writing, it was something else, a lingering presence, as if the story hadn't left him when he closed his laptop. He rubbed his eyes, shuffled into the kitchen and poured himself a cup of coffee. Then he sat down, opened his laptop and froze. The document was different again. Not in a big way, nothing obvious, but the wording had shifted. Some sentences read smoother than he remembered. Others felt slightly altered, as if someone had been editing behind his back. A new paragraph had appeared at the bottom. We wait in the spaces he forgets, but we do not sleep. Nathan's heart pounded. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant. Had he written that? Maybe. Maybe he had been half asleep. Maybe he had typed something weird without realizing it. Maybe. Shaking off the nerves, he started the next chapter. Felix and Elara walked through the empty streets, the town unnervingly quiet. "Where is everyone?" Felix asked. Elara didn't answer right away. Instead, she traced a finger along a nearby wall, frowning. The bricks felt strange, not rough like stone, but smooth, unfinished. "Not everyone stays," she murmured. Felix narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" She looked at him. "Do you remember the old man from last night?" He hesitated. He did. The one who had warned about the author. The man with the grizzled beard. But when Felix turned his mind to the details, his voice, his clothing, his name, it was all hazy, like a dream slipping away. Felix's pulse quickened. Where did he go? Elara exhaled. When the author stops writing about someone, they start to fade. At first, just a little. Memories, details, the small things. But if he never thinks about them again, she trailed off. Felix swallowed. They disappear. Elara nodded, like they were never here at all. A cold wind rushed through the street. Felix suddenly felt fragile, like something temporary, like something that could be erased. Then the ground trembled, a low, distant sound, a scraping, like stone grinding against stone. Felix turned toward the sound, his chest tightening. What was that? Elara's face had gone pale. "He's writing again. He's writing again," she whispered. The buildings at the edge of the town shifted. New structures rose. Streets stretched further than before. It was as if the world itself was unfolding in real time, expanding as the unseen hand of the author filled in the empty spaces. Felix clenched his fists. He needed to find answers. He needed to know why this was happening. And more than anything, he needed to know what would happen if the author decided he wasn't needed anymore. Interlude, when the author is away. The town was silent once more, but something had changed. The edges of the world stretched further now. There were new places, new buildings, proof that the author had been working, but something else had slipped in. something that hadn't been written. In dark alleyways, in the spaces between the known streets, figures stirred. They didn't belong to the story. They did not have names, and they were watching. Chapter 4. The Shifting Script. Nathan was starting to feel uneasy. He had always been a little obsessive about his writing, but this was different. The words didn't just flow, they seemed to pull him in. The more he wrote, the more real it felt. And the edits, the changes that appeared when he wasn't looking. He had checked the document's history. No autosaves showed the altered paragraphs. No sign that anyone but him had touched the file. And yet the words kept shifting, as if the story had a will of its own. The newest edition was the strangest yet. We wait in the spaces he forgets, but we do not sleep. And now something else has woken up. Nathan shuddered and shut the laptop. Maybe he needed a break. Or maybe he needed to finish the damn book before it finished him. Felix felt it before he saw it. A presence, a wrongness at the edge of the town, where the streets ended in empty mists. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Ilara nodded, eyes dark. Something is watching. They turned a corner and stopped. The street in front of them was changing, not growing like before, not expanding with the author's thoughts. This was different. It was shifting. Buildings warped, stretching too tall, then too short. Doors appeared where windows had been. The ground flickered between cobblestone and dirt, like the story itself couldn't decide what it was supposed to be. Then came the figure. It stumbled from the shadows. Its shape wrong, its limbs too long, its face blurred, as if it had never been fully written. Felix's stomach turned. What is that? Ilara took a step back, an unfinished thought. The thing twitched, its head jerking at an unnatural angle. "Forgotten," it rasped. Its voice was layered, multiple tones overlapping like an echo. "Unwritten, unwritten, not meant, not meant, not meant, but still here, here." Felix's blood went cold. It reminded him of something, a story he had read once, Kafka's Metamorphosis. A man waking up in a world that no longer recognized him, a body that didn't belong to him, a reality that had shifted without his consent. "What happens to the unfinished ones?" Felix whispered. Ilara didn't answer. The thing took a shuddering step forward. Felix wanted to run, but something about it, something about the way it moved, the way it suffered, it was like it was aware, like it knew. Felix clenched his fists. "What are you?" The thing's flickering face twisted into something almost human. "The story changed. The story changed," it rasped. "And I was left behind. Felix's breath caught. Had the author written this, or had it slipped in from the spaces between? And if the author wasn't in control anymore, then who was? Interlude, when the author is away. The thing moved through the forgotten streets, whispering to the dark corners. Other shapes stirred, things that should not exist, things that had no names, things that had once been ideas, now abandoned, left to fester in the margins of the story, and they had begun to wake up. Chapter 5. The Ones Left Behind. Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His story was taking turns he hadn't planned. The entity, the unfinished one, had come out of nowhere. He hadn't written it, at least not intentionally. But it felt like it had always been there, like something forgotten, lingering at the edges of his mind, waiting for the right moment to step forward. He thought about Metamorphosis, about Gregor Samsa waking up as something the world refused to accept. Gregor wasn't the horror of the story, his family was, his world was. Society had no patience for things that didn't fit neatly into their boxes. Nathan leaned forward, staring at his screen. His world was doing the same. It was rejecting its unwanted parts, and those parts were fighting back. Felix stood frozen, staring at the creature. It was barely holding together, its body flickering like a glitching image, its limbs shifting, searching for stability. It was something that had once been, a character, an idea, a possibility, before the world decided it didn't belong. "Who left you behind?" Felix asked. The creature twitched, its unfocused face struggling to form words. "Not left, not seen, not finished." Ilara grabbed Felix's arm. "We have to go." But Felix shook his head. "No, this isn't right." "None of this is right," she hissed. The creature trembled, its form dissolving at the edges. Its voice was weaker now. "Forgotten things do not survive. Felix felt something cold settle in his chest. This thing, whatever it was, had existed once. It had been a part of the story, but it had been cast out, abandoned in the margins, just like Gregor Samsa. Felix thought of the way Gregor's family had treated him, the way they had shut him away, erased him, pretended he had never been. And when he finally died, they had simply moved on. Would the author do the same? Felix stepped closer. "You don't have to fade." The creature's flickering grew erratic. "The story isn't mine. The story does not want me." Felix clenched his fists. "Then we have to change the story." Ilara's eyes winded. "Felix, you can't just..." But Felix wasn't listening. He reached out and touched the creature. The world shuddered. The sky rippled. The buildings trembled. The streets seemed to rearrange themselves, as if trying to reject what was happening. And for the first time, Felix felt something strange, something powerful. Like the words of the story were no longer just being written, like they could be rewritten. The creature gasped. Its form stabilized for a moment, its limbs aligning, its face becoming almost clear. And then Nathan blinked, his hands hovering over the keyboard. His breath was unsteady. Something had just happened, something real. His fingers trembled as he looked at the last line he had written. Then we changed the story. The cursor flickered. And for the first time, he wasn't sure who was writing who. interlude when the author is away. The forgotten ones whispered in the dark. Something had shifted. For the first time, one of them had been seen, and if one could return, so could others.